Hello, everybody. On behalf of the Hilti Foundation, I'd like to sincerely welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn. I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Kerstin Appel, and I started working for the Hilti Foundation last June. I'm responsible for music for social change and for maritime archaeology. That's why I'm standing here today. This Lunch and Learn is a very popular one. It was sold out very, very quickly. And I'm not surprised about that, given the fact that the underwater archaeology pioneer, Franck Goddio, is here with us today. It's a great honor and pleasure. And I don't want to take away too much time from you. I just would like to mention one thing. The weekly German newspaper, Die Zeit, publishes 5 good news every Saturday. If you look at the world today and all these bad news, those 5 good news every Saturdays are always very uplifting, and I love to read them. And a couple of weeks ago, there was one of the good news was, I quote, "Divers in Egypt have uncovered the wreck of a 2,000-year-old pleasure boat. Experts believe that Cleopatra herself once traveled on a boat this kind." So, dear Frank, what is it about Cleopatra and this boat? We would like to hear everything about it. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Liechtenstein. And I give you the floor in a second. I was just told that I'd like to tell you there's a photographer here, and he's going to take pictures of you. If you don't want your picture to be taken, please raise your hand. It's only going to be internal use, so nobody's going to sell those pictures to anywhere. So are you all okay with pictures being taken of you? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Frank, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody. I would like to present you the latest discovery that we have done 3 months ago. It's very fresh with the work of the team of the Hilti Foundation in Alexandria. And it's, you will see, the discovery of a legendary boat which was known only by ancient text and never found before. Ancient texts like Strabo in the 1st century BC were mentioning a special type of a boat that the kings and the court used to have fun in Alexandria, sailing alongside the channel and the port of Alexandria. And as a matter of fact, we had very little representation of such a boat. One of those representations is shown in a mosaic found in Italy about the Delta of the Nile, and it shows there what was mentioned as a thalamagos, meaning a pleasure ship. You can see it here with people from the court hunting hippopotamus on the Delta of the Nile. It all started with our mission with the Hilti Foundation in the port of Alexandria. You can see the port of Alexandria as per today from satellite, and you see only water. But under this, if you do some electronic survey, you can see that a lot is underwater. And as a matter of fact, we could reconstruct the topography of what was called the Portus Magnus, the great port of the antique world, Alexandria Portus Magnus. And in this Portus Magnus, the whole area which was east of the Portus Magnus was called the Royal Quarters. There were a port for the King Galley, a military port where Julius Caesar anchored his fleet, a large peninsula with the Temple of Poseidon, a central port here, and an island which has been described in ancient texts as Antirhodos Island, property of the kings. This was the word of Strabo in 29 BC. We have done a very special electronic survey very recently in 2022 with a new prototype of sub-bottom profiler, which give us, you can see here, it's a real prototype where it's not yet used by anybody else in the world. And it gave us representation, 3D representation on what is buried under the sediment, which is a very powerful tool for archaeologists. And of course, we have developed some program, like an AI program, in order to interpret the billions of data obtained from the surveys. And we have covered part of the Portus Magnus with those instruments. And you can see the line that we have done here and there, because in order to perform such a survey and have very precise image of what is under the sediment, the survey boat has to do line with a space of 1.5 meter between each line and make hundreds and hundreds of lines. You can count the lines here. One area was, of course, most interesting was the central area of the center of the royal quarter. And you can see here in that square, the island of Antirhodos and the small port, which is described by Strabo, the ancient author, as the special port for the king, for the pharaohs. There we had, of course, you can see the lines that we have done, hundreds of lines. And in one area, our algorithm show that there was something very special here. There. It looks small, but it's not that small. You will see, this is a kind of image of what is buried under the sediment. You can only see that. It doesn't tell you what it is. You have to discover what it is. But you can see that the signal is 27 meters long. Thus, we decided to do an excavation in one of the extremity where you can see the strongest reflections. And under 1.6 meter of sediment, some wood appear, which was the remain of a shipwreck. Okay, the remain of a shipwreck. We found many shipwrecks during our mission in the city of Tony-Seracheon. We found 108 shipwrecks as per today. In Alexandria, I think we found 7 or 8. Okay, one shipwreck. What is it? You know, is it an interesting shipwreck or a shipwreck that doesn't bring much to history? We are surprised because at that extremity, it shows that it was a kind of a barge because it has a flat bottom, hard shine and flat bottom. A barge. It's very strange to have a barge in a royal port, but okay. To be, you can see here during the excavation, with a kind of a water sediment cleaner, we take away all the soft sediment and all the stone, we are taking them away in the basket. You can see here the excavation. The wood is quite well preserved, but at the other extremity, something was strange. The boat had a round bottom, and it doesn't match. You can have a boat with flat bottom on one side and round bottom on the other side. So I thought, okay, we might have been fooled by the signal. We might be on two different shipwrecks, one above the other. It can happen very often that one shipwreck sunk over another one. Thus, we decided to fully excavate that wreck because, okay, maybe we were in presence of two different shipwrecks. And in the middle was something interesting, was belonging to one shipwreck or to the other shipwreck. Here, you see something very strange. You see the shipwreck here, this is from another period, World War II plane, which landed on the island of Cleopatra, unfortunately. We know the story of the officer on board. He saved his life during World War II, but he crashed his plane in the middle of the port of Alexandria, and it so happens that it landed on Antirhodos airport. But close by was there, a boat with a round bottom, something with a flat bottom here, and in the middle, something strange. So we could not define if it was flat or round. Thus we went on. And we understood that we were in presence of one and a single boat. And with a very special characteristic of a boat with a flat bottom at the bow and round bottom at the stern. And there we went back to the iconography and to the ancient text, and this was the definition of a special boat called Thalamegos, which was, Thalamegos means a boat supporting, holding a small palace or a small temple, and which were used for pleasure boat for the court and the king. Thus, we were in the presence of a Thalamegos with something strange. We had some evident, very early Roman characteristic. We were in the port of Antirhodos, okay? We had something very, very nice, is that the wood was extremely well preserved. You know, we are in presence of more than a 2,000-year boat there. And, okay, we were, for the first time in the world, in presence of a remain of the pleasure boat described by Strabo and by other authors, of course. Now we had to know more about that boat. You can see it here, fully excavated, 30 meters long, which means that that boat with the missing part would have been nearly 40 meters long. Thus we are in the presence of quite a big boat. Such a boat, this boat has no mast. Thus it was a rowing boat of 40 meters long. Thus, of course, it's not a small, an individual who can have such a boat. It's a boat which is used by the court, because the rowing person must have been more than 40 persons rowing, you know, with a small palace in the middle. The Thalamegos were used, if you look at the text, as pleasure boat. It could be also administrative court, transport of people, because they were a very fast boat. Sometimes they were even mentioned that they could carry cargo, okay? But here in the royal port of Antirhodos, most probably it was not the case. But they could be also they could also carry small temple. And we have a representation of such a boat in the bas-relief in Egypt. Thus, in the middle of it, you had small temple. Something extremely impressive and exciting, we found inscription on the wood, Greek inscription. And we were very glad to find, the team was very excited when we found this, because we work with a great expert from Greek and Egyptian, and from the letter, from the graphic of the letter, we can date very well the inscription from the letter. And Professor Carrez Maratre, who is a world expert in that, who is working with us in the team, said, okay, here, that inscription has been done early 1st century AD, which is a very, very precise. After 50, it cannot be. They would have used other type of letter. Before, yes, it could be late 1st century BC, but most probably early 1st century AD. Thus, we were very glad to have such a precise date, because if you do carbon 14, you have plus minus 50 years. Here we have plus minus 20 years, 15 years, not more. And furthermore, we found some artifacts above. And they are all from the 1st century AD. It means that the shipwreck, which is under, dates back from before. That's early 1st century AD, match perfectly. Now, you can see the wall boat. Why we haven't excavated the wall here? Because the UNESCO recommends that when you find a shipwreck, you have to preserve it. And to preserve it, the best is to put the sediment back on it. But even more than that, if you excavate the whole shipwreck, it will become very fragile. We have swell, a wave, and letting the sediment on one part of it, you know, is kind of putting weight on the whole shipwreck, and the shipwreck is much better preserved. Thus, and a shipwreck, a ship is always symmetrical. When you know half of it, of course, the other half should be the similar, because you never have a boat which is not symmetric. The only thing you have to do when you do an excavation, of course, is to excavate in the middle to have the full breadth of the ship. And then when you have that on the wall side, you know everything about the ship. Thus, you can see that we are dating, we are numbering all of the wood and even all of the peg. You know, we are putting a small sign on each of the peg. Thus, we have a Thalamegos, minimum 35 meter long, which is a very important vessel and quite impressive vessel there. Okay, it sank in the royal port of Antirhodos, but we know when it sank. It is dated from early 1st century AD. What happened in the island of Antirhodos 1st century AD? It was just after the death of Cleopatra VII. Augustus, the Emperor Augustus, took Egypt as a colony, but the island of Antirhodos has still a palace which belonged to Cleopatra, still, of course, there. But there was something more. There was something more. You can see here the place where the boat has been found. But close there, it's not there yet. What I wanted to say is that here, we are in the port of Antirhodos, 1st century AD. The place was still the property of the Emperor Augustus. Thus, nobody could come there without proper authorization. And that Thalamegos must have been a boat of prestige, of course. Boat of prestige, thus most probably a pleasure boat, represented as you have seen before in the Palestrina mosaic, but a pleasure boat, not a small pleasure boat. The Palestrina mosaic, it's a 15-meter pleasure boat. This is something very strange. You see the drawing here? This drawing of the mosaic has been done in the 16th century. when the mosaic has been dismantled, and that drawing is now the property of the King of England. It's in England, but you can see this boat much clearer that you can see it on the mosaic now, you know, and you see here people from the court hunting the hippopotamus with small, it's a very small boat. But this boat there was 35 meters long. That's at the same scale. I put the two boats. You can compare the Thalamegos of Palestrina mosaic and our Thalamegos. Thus, we have here Thalamegos which most probably belong to the king, you know. 40 meter, 35 meter long. It was most probably very impressive. And of course, there is a lot of text about those boats and the court making feast in the channel of Alexandria, linking Alexandria to the city of Canopus. And there was a whole legend about those Thalamegos and those pleasure boats, which even is mentioned in modern novels, you know, modern authors are referring to those feasts on those legendary boats. But I have another idea. The Thalamegos is on a site, very intriguing site, you know. It's not in the middle of the port, it's very close from the island and very close from the secondary branch of that island there. And on that secondary branch, we have discovered years before a temple, a very important temple, which is the temple of Isis, and from a stele, a written stone, which is now in a British Museum, we know the history of that temple on Antirhodos Island. And we know that that temple, which was a magnificent temple that we could reconstruct from what we have discovered underwater, that temple was the personal temple of Queen Cleopatra VII when she declared herself being the goddess Aphrodite Isis, and she put in her title the new Aphrodite, the new Isis, Nea Isis. And she was not said to be Isis, but she said she was Isis, she was the goddess. And this was accepted by the Egyptian clergy. That temple has collapsed in the port, and we work years and years on that area, and we were able to reconstruct with the specialist from what we have found the whole temple. We found the column, we found the corniche. Thus, we were able to reconstruct that temple there. That temple, which was a royal temple, was destroyed by an earthquake in 50 AD. Huh? This is something strange. We have the shipwreck before 50 AD. That temple is close to the temple. And is there a correlation there? The Thalamegos, this shipwreck was 45 meters away from the temple. 45 meters is nothing, you know. You have a boat nearly 40 meters long. The temple is 60 meters long. And when that temple collapsed and sank into the port, it must have done a kind of a tidal wave. And of course, the temple was destroyed during an earthquake, so it must have triggered a tidal wave. Thus, that shipwreck might have sunk during, at the time the temple was destroyed. And another thing also, the the wood was very precious at that time. All the wood of that Thalamegos has been imported from Lebanon. And the wood was very precious. And that shipwreck was nearly on the shore of Antirhodos Island. Why didn't they recover the wood? It was there, very easy to recover. It could have been because they could not touch the boat. And this, we had exactly the same phenomena in Tony-Seracheon. In a channel, we found a sacred barge, which has been sunk on purpose because when the boat was used, they could not destroy it because it has been touched by the god Osiris. And here, that boat, if that boat belonged to the temple, and if that boat would have transported the goddess Isis, you cannot touch it after when it sank. Thus, it could be also maybe a clue indicating that that temple must have belonged to the temple. And at that time, we know the story of the temple. Cleopatra was Isis. You know, when she committed suicide, of course, it was a kind of a dramatic event in the antique world. A goddess, pharaoh of Egypt, was committing suicide. No, it was something unbelievable. And we have a problem here. Maybe I will let you. The goddess decided that I should stop. Cleopatra decided. Yeah, when she maybe we can. Maybe it's. I will restart. I will restart. It means that we were. Just at the time where I will reveal a secret, you know. Goes by. Goes by. Up, up, up. Augustus took over Egypt. He was victorious. Cleopatra was dead. Augustus was very much against the cult of Isis, and he destroys the temple of Isis in Rome. Normally, you should assume that when he will take over Egypt and, of course, Alexandria, he will destroy the temple of Cleopatra, Isis. But he could not do it because he wanted to rule Egypt. And for ruling Egypt, you must have the clergy with you. And the clergy was worshipping Cleopatra as Isis. And he had an idea. He converted that temple to the temple of Isis, who protects the sailors and the Roman fleet, which every year we bring the grain from Egypt to Rome. And he converted that temple to the temple of Isis Euproia, Isis protecting the fleet and the sailors. And he made even gold donations that we found inside that temple because it was, okay, a kind of Isis, he could live with it. And, okay, every year the fleet was leaving Egypt, you know, with feeding, with all the grain to feed Rome. But the fleet could not sail during winter. So there was a special ceremony called Navigatio Isidae, held on March 5 every year, where the sailing season was reopened, you know, after the winter season. and there was a big celebration. We have different account of that celebration. One of them is from an ancient author, Apulé, and that author mentions that during that celebration, there was a special boat belonging to the temple of Isis, which was adorned with ribbons and flowers, and which was carrying the statue of Isis. And that boat was leaving the temple with all people in adoration, worshipping the temple and the statue of Isis. And there was a navigation from the temple of Isis of Alexandria towards the temple of Canopus, of Osiris in Canopus. You know, you can see here the whole route. The boat was leaving Alexandria and most probably was navigating here to reach the temple of Canopus of Osiris. Temple that we have discovered a year ago. Thus, we have most probably the starting point of that sacred navigation from Alexandria to Canopus. Alexandria, here we are with the remain of the temple of Isis in Alexandria, to the temple of Canopus that we discover. That temple of Osiris Canopus was a very important temple, and we found marvels and fabulous statue and monument in that temple. Thus, you have to think that that boat could have been one of what was called boat of Isis, and because it could have supported what they called a naos, that means a small temple, in which they were putting the statue of Isis. Thus, we have here, it's strange because we discover the temple in Alexandria, and we discover also the temple with some amulet representing the temple in Canopus here, and you see the main statue of a priest holding the canopic vase in Alexandria, and one of the main statues of the temple of Osiris Serapis in Canopus. Thus, most probably, if we take all those parameters, that boat could have been the boat is a Isis vessel, the Navigium Isidae, as it was called, which was ensuring the nautical Isiac procession between the two sanctuaries on March 5th every year, during that celebration to Isis. And you have here stereophotogrammetry 3D, which is composed of 27 pictures of the boat, taken very close from the boat, which give you a whole representation of this Navigium Isidae. It's very well preserved. You can think that on those plankings, maybe very important people made the trip between Alexandria to Canopus. And it's the first time that such a boat has been discovered. Hard shine and flat bottom at the bow, round bottom at the stern. And you can see here one of the graffiti, because we have several. We are still studying what they say. They might reveal something interesting. But I don't have still the report of Carès Maratre. But he is quite excited about those inscriptions. It's very emotional to find such a remain, because you know, you have ancient texts, but you have nothing and some representation, but here you have it actually, and furthermore in its biggest site, you know. In Alexandria, we are at the center of the antique world, you know. Alexandria was a center for culture, for science, for poet, and for politics. And everything we are finding in Alexandria is always better than everything which has been found elsewhere, because here you are at the start of everything. And all this work has been done on from our support vessel, Princess Duda, which has been totally renovated last year. It took 8 months of work to renovate the shipyard. And of course, by the team, supported by the ET Foundation. And all the team say a very, very big thanks to the ET Foundation. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we should have some questions.
It's
If there is some question about, yes? I think there is a mic. A microphone? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here again. It was great the last time. It was great today, at least for me. And also thanks to the foundation for making this happen. Very exciting topics. One question I do have in regards of the boat. You revealed one part of the boat. The second one is still covered. What is the next step? You will reveal the other side as well to see if there are some precious items, inscriptions. And at the end, second question, what will happen to the boat at final stage? What will happen to the boat at the end of the story?
I think it's a very important question. Shall we go on excavating the boat? Of course, you are always led to say, oh, we can have a nice artifact there, etc. Yes, maybe, but I will put the preservation of the boat prime to that. We have to be reasonable. We were very lucky to find the boat. We know now everything about the naval architecture of a boat, which has been mentioned in the text but never found before. I think we should be too greedy to go on. Thus, my recommendation will be, okay, as the two parts are symmetrical, we know that for the naval architecture, we will learn nothing more than what we have done. We could find some nice artifacts. We are on Antirhodos Island. If we want to find royal artifact, we go in the center of it. We have the palace. We will start excavation next year on that. If this is what I will propose to the ET Foundation, and I would recommend let that boat in peace now. We have, of course, after the excavation, recover the whole excavation with the same sediments that we took away from that boat. And UNESCO is recommending such a process. To bring it on land doesn't bring anything on the scientific point of view. It can bring something on the museographic point of view for a museum, but it's a huge undertaking, a very costly, huge undertaking, and it is not our job to do such a project. And UNESCO is always recommending to let the remain underwater, under the sediment. And you have to consider also that after 50 years, when I started long ago, 40 years ago, we were doing the best with the technique of that period when we were doing an excavation. But nowadays we are doing much more. And I say, oh, if I would have done this 40 years ago on that site, I would have gained a lot of knowledge. And here, we will let half of that boat for future archaeologists. Maybe one day they will, one team will take 1/4 of that boat and learn much more, and 50 years after, another team we take the other remain and know much more. Thus, my recommendation will be we let it, we know, we will study what we have found, and let us wait for future techniques and science to develop.
Thank you again for the great presentation. In one of the first slides, you have shown the scanning of the, let's say, of the harbor of the, let's say, the, many lines of scans you have performed. So this was one of the kind of interesting artifacts you decided to dig in. But are there any others which might be potentially equally interesting?
We have hundreds. Sometimes very small, sometimes much bigger, sometimes we have to choose. It's with algorithm. And when you change a parameter, something appears there. When you change the parameter, but you have 750 different parameters as we can change. And sometimes one parameter, you see boom, 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 a lot of things appearing. Of course, you have to interpret it. You have to see how deep they are, because we cannot go at any depth. As a matter of fact, during that mission, I had also a signal, but it was 3.5 meters down under the sediment. And during while two teams were doing that excavation, another team was trying to reach, and we could not reach it. That's, yes, there is a lot to do, Michael, a lot to do. Thank you for your question. Yes.
Is it understood why the boat has these two different hull shapes? So why the front of the hull is flat and the rear is round? Is this understood?
Excuse me,
Is it understood why the front of the boat has the flat bottom and the rear of the round bottom?
Yes.
Why is this the
Absolutely.
case?
We understand why. Because those boats were not boats to go at sea. They were boats which should sail with rowing on port, channel, and river. And the flat bow was allowing that boat to go on the ridge of, but that boat has to be maneuverable. If you have a flat bottom boat everywhere, you cannot sail correctly, And thus they made a round stern in order to steer perfectly, the boat. Thus it was a perfectly adapted boat for such huge pleasure party. Sometimes some ancient authors say, oh, it's terrible what happened on those boats. I don't want even to describe it. This was Strabo, for example. Others say, oh, a lot of fun, fine. And but also there was also this sacred boat, and it has to sail with quite a lot of, I would say, sacred. Yes. It was something very special. Thus, yeah, we understand why there was this flat bottom to go on shore, to go close to a temple, etc. But it had to be steered. The surround stern was perfect for that. Yeah, and this is why those boats were known to be very specific. And when we found, that specificity in the naval architecture of the shipwreck, we knew it was a Thalamegos.
How deep underwater was the city found, and how deep did you find this boat?
Yeah, it is. We are not deep there, because you have to understand that we are on sunken lands. It's 8 meters of water and 1.6 meters of sediment. That's all together less than 10 meters. But what is impressive is that the Antirhodos Island collapsed 8 meters in a fraction of a second. That must have been a tremendous event. Yeah. We have sometimes remains and we see some remains which are sometimes much deeper because there is much deeper port at that time for very big boat. But the deeper the boat were, the deeper the boat sank, and the sediment came above it. And we see targets sometimes at 7 meters deep under the sediment, but we cannot reach. The whole mission of the whole team on one spot could not reach 7 meters during 45 days. It's too much of a, because of course, when you do a hole under the sediment, you have a kind of a cone, you know, and that cone for 7 meters high is higher than that. It's hundreds and hundreds of tons of sediments that we have to evacuate.
Thank you. What are your next projects? What do I hear from you when I see you next year? This is always fantastic, and I like to see and hear it. So what's your next step?
Well, the next step has to be decided. And somebody says this to me. But it might be something very interesting. We will learn a lot. We will learn a lot. I'm sure I will convince.
So there should always be a little secret in the end. There was
always a secret in Alexandria.
That's true. There was one question online, and that was, how long did it take to excavate from start to finish?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Sometimes, you know, people say, oh, you need years to excavate a boat, etc. It's not my position. Let us compare this to modern surgery, compared to old surgery. Before, you didn't have X-ray, no IRM, you know. You had to have surgeries, they were opening, they were looking and doing what they could do. Now, before going to surgery, you go to scanner, IRM, X-ray, and they know exactly what to do on one spot, and they open exactly where it should be open, and the faster you do, the better, because it's better to stay on surgery 5 hours than 15 hours. I would say it's the same for excavating a boat. Thus, now, when we excavate a boat, we have, you know, we know in advance the length, more or less, because we have prior data. And we put dedicated team in several parts of that boat, and we do the excavation very professional, very fast, very precise. And it took us a month to excavate half of that boat, meaning to excavate, to do the whole project, and to put back the sediment on it. That's, I would say, 1 month for a job. Sometimes some team will take several years to do it, but it's bad. Why? Because if you take several years, you will take the sediment out of a place, you will put the sediment back, then next year you will come back, you have to put back again the sediment, and etc., and the remain. It's a disaster for the remain. The faster, the more precise, and if it is done professionally, the better.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? There would be a couple of minutes left. No? Well, in this case, Frank, oh!
There is only wood found. You haven't found any artifacts or made from metal? So I would expect if it's a...
It's a good question, because this was my reaction also. We have later artifact, I would say, on that boat, but we don't have artifact from the period of the boat belonging to the boat. And that boat is just on the ridge of Antirhodos Island. It means that everything which could have been taken out of that boat has been taken out. We don't have the remain of the naos or of the small palace which was on it, because it must have been precious thing. Thus, everything has been recovered except the wood. Except the wood. Thus, it means that they could have recovered everything if they wanted. They didn't. It leads me to say that most probably it was a sacred boat. Yeah.
Sacred, everything what was on it was not sacred. And
no, because everything, it was a structure would touch the goddess, which you could not, like a temple, you could not destroy a temple. You could not destroy a sacred barge. But of course, if you could recuperate some bronze or gold or marble, yeah, of course. We had, it's a good point also, but we have not done it in Alexandria. In Tonis Herakeion, when we found the sacred barge of Osiris, which was much less long, it was 11 meters long, we have done an excavation around the barge. What we found was sacred deposit all around, made of metal, of bronze simpula, tray, and present. Here we have not done it. Maybe there is such a deposit around that barge.
What is for you personally the highlight of that whole project?
Well, I think every year is a highlight, because last year we achieved, we didn't finish because it could take ever, the excavation of the IEASM of Antirhodos, another year we found, the Timonium where Cleopatra and Antony live and created the company of those which live an inimitable life, the Timonium. There is a highlight every year on each of the 3 sites we are working.
I have a complicated question from online.
Yes.
So, have any underwater discoveries forced you to reinterpret classical authors you once trusted? And were there any details which surprised you most when compared with ancient textual descriptions?
Yes. Yeah, it's very interesting. We take an example of the father of history, Herodotus. Herodotus, father of history, came to Egypt in 450 BC. And where did it land in Egypt? In the city of Tonis Herakeion, which is now submerged 7 kilometers from the present coast of Egypt, that city that we discovered. And Herodotus, coming in that city, talked about the temple, talked about the boats, the barrier I was telling you, etc., and say a lot of things. And some historians say, poor Herodotus. What is he saying? It's impossible. For example, he's talking about a boat, which is built by wooden bricks without rib. It cannot be. Poor Herodotus, he didn't look very well, and the historian was doubting a lot about the description of Herodotus. As a matter of fact, in Tonis Herakeion, we found several wrecks, 80 of those only, among the 108 shipwrecks that we found, which is big, with wooden bricks, and you cannot see the rib because they are internal ribs, Thus, he was 100% right. And his testimony was challenged by even modern scientists. He was right. The only way that he was expressing himself like you express yourself in the 5th century BC, not now. And it's an example, but here also, for example, the discovery of Thalamegos enable us to illustrate fully and to understand better those type of a boat which were described in the antiquity.
In this case, Thank you so much,
Good.
Franck, and congratulations to everything. It was fantastic. Almost like an addiction, listen to you. I can't stop listening to you. It's like an addiction listening to you. But we have to stop now. Thank you so much for coming. Please feel free to take a lunch with you if you're still hungry, and also a notebook and a pen from the Hilti Foundation. Take the Hilti Foundation with you and spread it all over. Thank you so much.